unpack. We unpack. We unpack. Coming to you live. Boxingego unpack. Yeah. We unpack. We unpack. We unpack. Coming to you live. Bounce with me. Can you bounce with me? Yup. Oh, the Canelo man fans is mad at Terence Crawford. But did he tell any lies? What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Let's get into it. The other day, Terence Bud Crawford, top fighter, he did an interview with Sirius XM and DAZN, and he made some statements basically saying that Canelo Alvarez, I made videos about it. This is why you guys gotta subscribe to my channel for the latest and greatest in boxing, because we go over this stuff. I talk about the latest and greatest, the hottest topics, the trending topics, and what's going on in this boxing game. So Terence Crawford made these statements that Canelo Alvarez, in his opinion, has shied away from challenging black fighters, right? And then he even referenced Jermall Charlo and Demetrius Boo Boo Andre, two guys that Canelo could have fought in multiple divisions, but he didn't. And it has created a frenzy with old media. Old media, the Canelo man fans, they are angry at Bud Crawford. Now, let me just shed some light on this. When this is how old media works, I told you, shapeshifters, I told you, when Terence Crawford is like a lot of these racists in old media and the people who are truly biased, it's anti-PBC, it's anti-black fighters. So whoever suits that or fits that bill, then they're riding with it. So it's funny how Terence Crawford, and I said that to say this, it's funny how Terence Bud Crawford, everybody loved him when he was going at a PBC fighter, Errol Spence, and wanted to make that fight. Even though there's another guy who's been working with PBC, I'm just showing you how the game goes. I'm showing you how this thing works, right? There's another guy who's been working closely with PBC and Manny Pacquiao. You don't see the same people pushing for Crawford to get the Pacquiao fight. These are the two fights that he, at a point, said he wanted to fight. He said these are the guys on his short list, Pacquiao and Errol Spence. But they're only pushing for him to fight the black fighter that is aligned with PBC. That's for starters. The other thing is this. Notice how these same shapeshifters, these same bigots, these same racists, they love Terence Crawford when he's beefing or challenging and threatening Errol Spence's supremacy and dominance and undefeated record and challenging a PBC fighter. They're all for that action, which it's a good fight, you know, Spence, but we know there's ulterior motives there. However, now that Terence Bud Crawford has spoke on something totally unrelated to, you know, I guess shitting on a PBC fighter, now all of a sudden people are angry at Bud Crawford. So I want to make this follow-up video and let's just talk about what he said. What Bud Crawford said, that I'm seeing a lot of anger, you know, and it's funny to me. I've been doing this for years. I've been in the game for years. It may be an edible. There's rules to this. I wrote you a manual. Like Christopher Wallace said, the King of New York, right? And the thing is this, there's a lot of people that get so distracted with anything that they possibly can to deflect from the actual situation at hand. Is what Terence Crawford is saying, is it really believable or is it atrocious? Does it make sense? Instead, you have all these diversions. People are talking about, oh, Bud, he's one to talk. Look at Bud's resume, boom, boom, boom. Listen, there could be a homeless person, right? And you can have a stable job and a living situation, and there'll be a homeless person that they might be able to provide you a piece of information about saving money or investing. So you can listen to what that person is saying. A gym is a gym. You see what I'm saying? So even if a person's homeless and they've fallen on hard times, that doesn't mean that the advice that they're giving you about finances and savings is null and void, and you should omit that. So that's the situation. There's a lot of people who are distracting from what's actually being said to attack Terence Crawford's character and his resume and stuff like that. We don't care about that. What we care about is the statements he made. And I actually agree with Terence Crawford. I think there's a certain style and there's certain fighters that Canelo Alvarez and his team know will be a difficult fight. And for the longest, it's been black fighters. It's been black fighters like Jermall Charlo and Demetrius Andrade. I think their names have been linked to Canelo for the longest because they were in the same divisions simultaneously at the same time. They could have fought at 154 or when Canelo was at 155 Canelo weight. And you see these little slick moves from Canelo Alvarez. I was born ready, right? So he fought at a catch weight of 155. Everybody, listen, I'm just showing you the game plan. Mayweather fought Canelo at a catch weight of 152. People use that as an excuse. They said, oh, Mayweather sucked him down to 152 pause, and he was weight drained and all that stuff. But before the fight, they believed Canelo could beat Mayweather, and he got spanked. But then what they don't tell you is Canelo's whole career after that, he fought a ton of fights at 155, which is a catch weight. There is no weight class. There's nobody currently in boxing fighting at 155 at all. So almost all of Canelo's gold and his best fights have been fought mostly at catch weights. You know what I mean? Or weight stipulations, rehydration clauses. Like the Cotto fight, that was at 155. And then when he fights a Liam Smith, he comes back down to 154. So Liam Smith is a fighter who had that WBO belt. And you dropped the extra pound from Canelo weight 155 and went to 154 to fight Liam Smith when he later got the belt. But the person who initially had the belt and was stripped because of inactivity in politics with his promoter couldn't give him big fights or whatever the situation was. And that was Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade, a black fighter. So what Crawford is saying doesn't sound off the mark. You could have fought Demetrius Andrade for the WBO belt. He even called you the B word. He called you a bizzle, a beezy, right? And you did nothing about it. And you just allowed him to do that. It took for Edeslandi Lara, an Afro-Cuban, to hop on the stage to finally be heard by Canelo and put him such on the spot that Canelo decided to fight him. And if you look at that, that was an extremely close fight. I thought Lara won the fight, right? But Lara had been calling him out for way longer than the tipping point was when he got on stage and embarrassed Canelo. So there is a history of this and Canelo not fighting certain styles. And for the longest, like I said, because they were at 54 / close to 55 where he was at, it was black fighters. Charlo, two Charlos. At 54, you could have fought Jermell or Jamal. Jermell, look at who he's fought at 54. Canelo, listen, I know it hurts. And what I'm saying makes a lot of sense. So it's going to make a lot of people mad, but good, because you could dislike. Like I always say, you could dislike, but you can't disprove. Tell me that Canelo at 154, 155 has a crazy resume compared to Jermell Charlo. Jermell Charlo is literally legit unifying the division with tough fights, like Jason Rosario, who had just stopped J-Rock. And I'm talking about, you guys got to look, and I don't want to make this video too long, so you guys got to do your history and do the education, but I'm talking about guys coming off momentous occasion, monumental performances. You look at when Canelo fought Kirkland, something like that. Kirkland was on a year-plus layoff, and he was in a war with Glenn Tapia, and he had no longer had Ann Wolfe. So that wasn't necessarily the most momentum. Versus Jermell Charlo at 54 currently, just last year, the end of last year, October, I believe it is, he fought Jason Rosario after he had crushed a guy in his hometown in Philly, and that was J-Rock. And J-Rock was coming off of just crushing Swift Jared Hurd in his hometown in DC, DMV area. So what are we talking about? So the fact is, you'll see throughout this video that Canelo has avoided certain fighters. Demetrius Andrade, when he was the WBO champion, and he was both on HBO. HBO had Canelo and had Andrade. Then you have two Charlo brothers that he could have fought, right? Canelo didn't fight any of them. Jermall Charlo was his mandatory, right? Jermall Charlo was his mandatory at 160, and then he becomes franchise champion. To him and the WBC work together in cahoots to nullify and just elevate Jermall Charlo without giving him the opportunity. And that's not boxing. Boxing is about the opportunity to prove yourself. But this is what they're doing, systematically oppressing certain black fighters when they work. Like, you would think you work your way up the rankings to get that shot. And you hear when it comes to Average Pilgrim and Avni Yildirim and guys like that, people can't wait for him to get his mandatory shot at Canelo. Say, oh, it's a mandatory. But what about Jermall Charlo? He was the mandatory too. He was the #1 ranked guy with the WBC, and they found a way around that with the franchise champion. So I could do this all day. Demetrius Andrade, again, they could have fought at 54, fought at 60. He's even expressed interest in moving up to 68, but he looks, even though he's been on the same networks as Canelo, HBO, and now DAZN platform, he looks nowhere near close to getting that fight. In fact, Canelo did an interview, and he said Demetrius Andrade's style is too boring, but you're about to fight Billy Joe Saunders, who has done nothing at 168 either. So if Andrade is boring, I think Andrade has more power than Billy Joe Saunders. So how is Andrade, the black fighter, boring, but Billy Joe Saunders ain't boring? Average Pilgrim just showing up for a paycheck and getting punched up in 2 rounds, that's not boring. You know, Caleb Smith standing around like a statue for 12 rounds getting pummeled, that's not boring. You know, Kovalev looking lethargic and looking horrible, that's not boring. But Demetrius Andrade is too boring to get a shot. Come on. And they've done this again and again. Canelo's team, they did it with Willie Monroe. And I know at this point now people say, oh, Canelo would have destroyed Willie Monroe. But at the time, Willie Monroe was doing all right for himself. And he was a guy considered that could create some movement and slick enough to make Canelo look bad. And he kept calling for the Canelo fight. And Canelo's team outright said, we don't want to fight Willie Monroe. We hate his style. So what Crawford said doesn't look far off the mark. And that's just something you got to deal with. Let me know what you guys think. Also, use my link this weekend, UFC, Stipe Miocic, Francis Ngannou. Order that ESPN Plus pay-per-view using my link. It does help the channel. And you can click the link for TUBEBUDDY. That's a great way to level up your content. Let me know what you guys think. I'll be talking about this issue much more. Much more to come. We working. So if you enjoyed this video and want more content like this on the channel, you can show your appreciation by going to the PayPal donate button or the YouTube support button, and you can donate any amount that you feel is equivalent to the value of this video. Much more to come. Thank you guys for your support. Boxingego, the future of boxing.